What I want to talk to you about is the use of kettlebells. Now, I want to do it very respectfully because I know a lot of people in the kettlebell genre and they're good people. So the challenge I've got is that I've had certain thoughts and certain concerns, and I'm not shared them openly before, so it's probably about time. And so hopefully the message can be considered and reflected upon. But if they want to shoot the message, it wouldn't be the first time. So the history is interesting because, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, we used to joke about the way in those days what was called the Soviet Union, experts, coaches would come over and realise that there's money to be made in America, and the minute you use the word Russian associated with something, it gave you marketing turbocharging, and we used to refer to it as the Soviet scams. So it's interesting to learn about something as far as its origin. Enough said there. So what we do is we've got a kettlebell. Where's my kettlebell gone? So I'll bring that back in. Now, what the kettlebell has done has provided another piece of equipment. And there's a trend in the industry that I believe compensates for lack of competence, where people want to get the next trend in the hope that that's going to save them in the marketplace, save them professionally, or to be seen to be keeping up with their colleagues. So whether or not the new trend is actually needed, or whether the new trend has got a future role, or it's really needed, as I said, is almost irrelevant. So I don't mind when people use trends for trend's sake, that's their choice. But when they're doing something that's starting to filter its way into the athletic market, that's when I get a little bit more concerned. Because the general population will always do some weird and wonderful stuff. And because their goals are so diverse, that's their choice. But when some of those trends creep in and have damaging effects on the athletes, I start to speak up a little bit more. So I get, you happy to come forward, John? I'm going to start with the exercise for me that's the biggest concern, and that's the swing. Now I know that there's other exercises of the swing, and we will go through them all, but I'm just going to go through the swing in the first instance. So John, if you want to pick up the implement, please. Now get in the position used for the kettlebell swing. Now, for starters, when I'm working with athletes, there are incredibly few sports that require a wide stance. Now, transfer or specificity to sport is something that is quite complex. However, to cut a long story short, with the stance is the transfer variable that concerns me. If you get a strength adaptation and a wide stance, and you're in a sport that has a narrower stance, it has limited transfer. In addition to that, you're shortening the external rotators and your abductors at a far greater rate than you otherwise would. And in many sports, that's actually a concern. So you're accelerating here. The external rotation is also fairly unacceptable for me as a factor we're seeking to overcome in sport. So by virtue of the stance, we're already in trouble. So go through one rep for me, John, and we might even have to turn sideways. Excellent. So it's promoted as both a leg exercise as well as a trunk exercise or a total body exercise. Take a break. And generally speaking, you've got minimal knee bend. So as far as leg involvement, it's minimal. The legs are used to initiate the movement, and you could say there's a training effect there, but you know, it's not that much. For me, most of the work is being done in the trunk. So to help understand this, the minute the implement reaches an angle of about here, through to about here, the leg drive has minimal impact, and the forces have to be going in a certain direction. So if you put the thinking mind to it, to displace an object at this angle through to this angle, you have to basically be engaged in extension or backward displacement of the centre of gravity. So there are very few sports that require you to go backwards in terms of a forceful extension backwards. Now, as I said, in general population, you can do any weird and wonderful thing you want. But in an athlete, if you create an adaptation that's non-specific, you're failing, not only you're omitting to develop something that is going to contribute, you're potentially creating something that is damaging to the athletic performance. And I'm going to explain to you why. When you could turn around sideways this way a little bit more. What I've seen occurring in athletes who do a lot of this exercise is an overdevelopment of the thoracic extensors. Now, for my technical model, when you're executing the base movements like a squat and a deadlift or a squat and a clean, if you fail to use your hips and your spine as one lever, and if you're pivoting anywhere in the spine and using your spinal erectors or thoracic extensors, it's not an overly effective way to create force in sport. It's fairly fairly irrelevant, but it's also breaking down the force chain from the hip. In addition to that, extensive development of the thoracics changes people's posture, and this is something that may be more relevant to the general population. So an adaptation of this exercise will result in your weight being displaced further backwards. The adaptation is to have a thoracic extension. And a weight on the heels means hips forward, shoulders back, head forward. So you're running the risk of damaging posture over and above an athlete destroying your athletic ability, especially your stance in speed. So whenever the weight is to the front of the body, it changes the centre of gravity. So even when the weight is simply here, as opposed to the weight here, it changes the centre of gravity. My preference for most exercises is I prefer the weight to be over the body. So for postural reasons, for centre of gravity reasons, I actually prefer a bar on the back than a bar on the front. So the front squat, for example, it would, for me, it's more preferable to have a back squat because of the position or the postural adaptation. But this is accentuated by the length of the lever. The longer the lever from the centre of gravity, if you watch where his body has to go, so do it slowly, no, just do it slowly, just a slow front race. Now he might be exaggerating a little bit, you could say, but the reality is, the longer the lever to the front, the more the extension going backwards. Now I've come up with a belief and a theory that your spine, your body adapts to the shape that you load in. So over a period of time, the longer you do something, the position of your body at the point of extreme load is the shape that you'll be walking around with for the next 23 hours of the day. So the fact that the lever is longer to the front is the second concern. So the first concern was the fact that the weight's to the front. The second concern is the length of the lever. And the third concern, what I already touched upon, was that for the most part it's a thoracic extension exercise. Now this is just one exercise, and before I go on to the remainder of exercises in the suite of kettlebell exercises, and I will be talking about the pros and cons of the rest of them, it's important for me to just reiterate, you can do any exercise you want. But if you're an athlete, in a forward, vertical, or lateral displacement sport, I've got some serious question marks about the negative impact this exercise will have on your performance, and also, if you have a chronic adaptation to it, on your posture, which the second point was relevant to general population. So we're going to move on now to probably 10 or 15 other